Now, in my last lecture, I was talking about the Hahnemannian miasmatic definition. This was in response to one of the questions on what exactly are miasms by my student, right? So let's now move on to Kentian miasmatic definition. Now, Kent divided these miasmatic diseases into two types. The first one he called as simple miasms, where he accepted Hahnemannian definition that the fundamental cause of chronic diseases was due to an infective agent that a patient suffered in the past. This would then go on to create a predisposition to chronic diseases, which is the secondary miasm, right? However, in his experience, he found another type which is much more prominent, and he called them the complicated miasm. And here, there was no past history of miasmatic infection. So there is no H infection, or there is no syphilitic infection, or there is no psychotic infection. And yet, this person showed symptoms of latent and secondary miasms. So this was basically, in the case of latent and secondary psora, this was in children who inherited the miasm from their parents who might have had simple psora. Further on, he went to propose that it was man's moral transgression that piles up generation after generation that could create this psoric predisposition, probably influenced by Swedenborg's Christian theologist and scientist in his time who might have influenced his thought process at that point. But what he's trying to say here is there is no past history of any suppressed itch in the child. Probably it might have been in the parent, and the child will still inherit the secondary miasmatic predisposition. Similarly, you could see no past history of syphilis or sycosis, but you see symptoms of latent or secondary syphilis or psychosis in people. This could be wives of husbands who might have simple syphilis or psychosis, or it could be children from their parents. So what he was proposing was the fundamental cause of chronic diseases was not from an infection in the past, but it could be a predisposition, a diathesis, a dyscrasia, or a constitutional tendency that was mostly inherited through generations. Now, this definition of miasm as a predisposition was taken on further by students like J.H. Allen, as I mentioned last time, Margaret Tyler, H.A. Roberts, as well as contemporary homeopaths of today. So it has actually been one of the most predominant miasmatic understanding, homeopathic understanding, right? So Kentian miasm was a huge milestone in homeopathy. It changed the way homeopathy is practiced in the contemporary world, giving rise to so-called classical or constitutional homeopathy. Now, you have to understand Hahnemann's understanding of miasm. He gave us the definition and just the concept of what exactly must be happening when you have a miasmatic condition. However, it was Kentian miasmatic understanding that actually helped give you the practical application of these miasms. And I'll come to that in a moment. But some of the contemporary Indian homeopaths who followed Kentian miasms that I highly recommend exploring are Dr. Dowley, Dr. Vijaykar, Dr. Subrata Kumar Banerjee, because they have given you all these patterns of latent and secondary miasms, which from their practices, which have made a huge difference to you being able to recognize those miasms. So when you study Kentian miasms, it involves understanding these miasmatic predispositions patterns. And these patterns percolate in the mental and the physical generals as latent miasm, and in the particulars, the secondary miasms, and in the pathology as tertiary miasms. So these patterns can be seen in the entire patient, generals, particulars, pathology. The whole state comes together as one big miasmatic disease process. So I'll give you some examples. Kentian psora could cause all sorts of vesicular itchy skin eruptions and diseases that could run through the entire patient. Kentin syphilis manifested predominantly as a destructive process in the form of ulcers, sore throats, bone necrosis, periostitis, and so on. Kentin sycosis will be manifested predominantly as uterine, ovarian, or abdominal troubles, joint pains, rheumatic arthritis, anemia, sore muscles, and so on. So the difference here is Hahnemann put all conditions under psora. Majority of the conditions, he's mentioned about 7/8 of the chronic diseases, all those diagnostic names come under psora. But Kentin miasms have given you 3 distinct classifications and 3 distinct patterns that you can identify right from head to toe, generals to particulars, common to peculiars in the miasms, and have a distinct class of symptoms which are psoric, symptoms which are syphilitic, and symptoms which are psychotic. And the remedies that match these are called anti-miasmatic remedies. So antipsoric remedies match the predisposition patterns of psora, antipsychotic remedies match the predisposition patterns of psychosis, and antisyphilitic remedies match the patterns of syphilitic miasm. And when you're treating, you basically are understanding these patterns and you're matching them, both the latent and the active. So this is very, very important, and this is all about studying miasms in the Kentin way. So in the next lecture, I'm going to talk about Sankren's miasmatic understanding.